Anyway, my first video. I can't figure out um, how to record a video, so I'll just go live and hopefully it will record. Okay, this is a book I got at the library. Transfiguration of Our World by Gordon Asher Davidson. And I'm just going to read it to you, and it's something that you could listen to while you're driving, and I might be interrupted or get a phone call, and then I'll have to stop, and hopefully it will save onto my YouTube account. I have no idea how this works yet in my first video. Anyway, I'm going to read this interesting book that I've only read the first couple pages of, but I found it really interesting, and so I thought that I would read something that somebody could listen to while they're cleaning the house. And I really hope that the sound is okay because I didn't even check it. So I apologize. If you can't hear me at all, then I'll just find out later and I'll delete this video. Okay. Section 1. I wish you could see the earth instead of just that title. But anyway. Section 1, Love, Light, and Darkness in Our Solar System. So I already read this, so I'm going to try to fly through it, hopefully. Chapter 1, Opening Portals into the Matrix of Love. Love, even as it is most deeply understood, is much more than is usually considered. The spiritual hierarchy, the evolved masters and higher beings who guide and overlight humanity and the earth, does not experience love as just an energy that can be called upon to sweeten or clarify relationships, or that stimulates, warms, and opens hearts, or brings the energy of repentance, forgiveness, and lasting connection, although it provides all of these. Love is an all-pervading, omnipresent, infinite field matrix of energy which transcends all dimensional limitations of time and space and creates an indissoluble bond between all worlds and dimensions. It is an energetic matrix which, when entered at any point in any dimension, ultimately unfolds into a unity of consciousness with ever-expanding wholes to which there is no end or limit. Love is the greatest expander and extender of consciousness there is, the link between all the worlds and dimensions. It is the ever-present matrix which holds every atom in every galaxy in right relationship. As such, entering the matrix through any dimensional portal intimately and ultimately leads into an ever-expanding revelation of the seamless unity of the whole, which is the one life. Thus, the task of unfoldment for each individual unit of life is to discover their unique portal of entry into this matrix of love, the one life. The point of entry can be love for oneself, one's family, group, nation, or the world. Once entered, the matrix steadily and naturally expands the focus of love, its reach and inclusive embrace ultimately to all the worlds. In this understanding is hidden the secret of the human heart and its capacity to endlessly expand into the whole. This is why the mind, without the unfoldment of the heart, is incomplete and ultimately limited by the power of its own thought forms. These thought forms are crystallized patterns of thought that circulate through our minds and become an energetic barrier that can block the entrance of higher truths and experiences. The mind and its thought forms cannot transcend themselves without the realizations discovered by entering the matrix of love. This explains why the opening to love is an ultimate opening to all of humanity and to the entire planet. And finally to the universe and its unlimited presence. The source of love is innate within the nature of divinity itself. When any contact or opening to love is made, a portal of resonance with this divine presence and reality is opened, which elevates and transforms the nature of the one who opens. One then enters into the potential to ultimately know and experience the great matrix of love that extends infinitely in all dimensions and worlds. Each of our entire multidimensional beings is like a giant tuning fork, which has the potential to resonate with any frequency. When we resonate with love at any entry point, we enter this field matrix of love. of love. of love. The chakras are centers for this energy reception and expression, and their degree of development and openness influences our capacity to receive and radiate love. However, an individual's entire etheric, emotional, or mental body can also resonate to the love frequency, and thus an entry into the love matrix is created. This occurs even if the chakras are not opened or developed, although the full reception and expression of love requires this development. This is how less developed people can be influenced by love and help to understand it. There's a meditation, and we'll do that later. End of section 1 for a relative exercise on the matrix of love. So we'll do that sometime. Okay. Chapter 2, The Hidden History of Our Earth. Only page 4. Introductory comments. Gaining a true understanding of the inner hidden history of Earth and humanity is a potent and deep initiation into the mysteries of life. In exploring this topic, it is important to remember that the forces of light are always more powerful than the forces of darkness, and in fact are the primary power in our system. They are the originators of the plan for the transfiguration of our world. In the ageless wisdom tradition, it is said that the spiritual hierarchy, the masters and enlightened beings, came to Earth millions of years ago and have guided and assisted humanity at every step of our evolution. And one of their major tasks throughout humanity's evolution has been to offset the activities and influence of what is known as the Dark Lodge. From many teachings, we know about the spiritual hierarchy and the masters and higher beings who work with them, but very little about the origins and the workings of the Dark Lodge. This was intentional by the masters, and we are now entering deeply into this topic because humanity is ready to understand the activities and impact of these dark forces in our world. While we are each responsible for transforming our own shadow aspects, our individual darkness, it is important that good spiritual people understand the larger forces of darkness in our world today beyond our personal unresolved issues. These larger dark forces feed off the collective dark impulses within humanity, which is why it is so important for us to work on our own transformation. We live in the third dimension of a planet of duality created by God or Spirit for our spiritual growth, so we can experience the opposites, learning to appreciate them all, and then transcending these temporary three-dimensional dualities into our culture, politics, religion, etc. We have to learn to recognize darkness or harmful thoughts and actions and to freely choose good instead. There is a state of non-duality beyond good and evil, often called the fourth or fifth dimensions, embodied by enlightened masters throughout history. They have fully overcome the challenges of the darkness within themselves, and they tirelessly work to offset the larger evil in our world. But we must remember, it is not possible for us to transcend what we have not fully understood. The Dark Lodge is a group of beings who are completely dedicated to controlling and dominating the world for their own exploitative and dark purposes, with absolutely no respect for human free will or human life. The agents and outer organization of this inner Dark Lodge are often popularly called the Cabal. Exploring what the Dark Lodge really is can confront us with very potent truths that might inspire fear, a sense of overwhelm, or other emotions. This is one of the reasons that we have begun this book with a strong focus on the matrix of love, its function, and how to access it. This will help us to maintain this loving field as we explore this intense but very significant and necessary topic. The information you will find in this book will help you understand Earth's history, the causes of current conditions in the world, and the forces behind events in a completely new light. This perspective will likely challenge many of the assumptions you have held about how the world is. I invite you to approach this topic with an open heart and mind, and with the fearlessness and courage of a spiritual warrior, knowing you always have the backing of the spiritual masters and the forces of light in a loving and benevolent universe. The Galactic Wars and Formation of the Light Alliance. The history of our galaxy for very long cycles of time has been fraught with interplanetary conflicts and wars. Great and terrible destructive weapons were used to attack and destroy whole civilizations. After centuries of great battles between positive civilizations that honored free will and the evolution of all races and civilizations, and those darker civilizations that sought to conquer, exploit, and enslave others, the light forces gained supremacy throughout the galaxy. The various existing alliances were ultimately woven into what is called the Galactic Light Alliance, also known as the Galactics. The Light Alliance is based on an agreement to keep the peace and uphold the principles of freedom, self-chosen development and evolution, and friendly relations between all races and civilizations. The degree of contact is entirely left to each race and planet, although peaceful, non-violent criteria are required. Those planets still struggling to achieve this degree of consciousness are carefully protected and often supported to evolve to this stage of maturity. Many of these galactic civilizations live and function on multiple dimensions, and some focus very little, if at all, on the three physical dimensions. This is why planets appear to be uninhabited, which is not true in reality. Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter, for example, have active and highly evolved civilizations present. Other planets, such as Uranus and Pluto, have the function of relating to the larger galaxy and transmitting these energies to planets in our solar system. All of this ordered divine activity takes place within the body of the solar logos, the being whose body of manifestation is the planets of our system, and the grand heavenly being, the being made up of 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. This beautiful divine order is governed by the spiritual principle that the microcosm always reflects the macrocosm and vice versa. The reason that information about galactic civilizations has been suppressed by governments and the media is not just because this information is outside the normal paradigm and might frighten people. More importantly, it is because the dark forces who have mostly controlled the media and many governments know the galactics, recognize and oppose them, and are the only power capable of overthrowing their dark rule of this planet. The disruption of the plan for Earth, or Gaia. Earth, often referred to as Gaia, was conceived of and created as an ultimate expression of physical beauty, abundance, and joy that was meant to be shared by all lives present upon it. It was protected by the Light Alliance guardians and other spiritual beings overlighting its evolution. However, no protection is absolute, and due to an unprecedented anomaly in the time-space continuum millennia ago, a certain group of a predatory alien race was able to enter from another dimension and establish itself on Earth with the intention of colonizing its resources and people for their own uses. For a very brief period, they were able to conceal themselves from the guardians of the Light Alliance. The function of the dark forces in the plan. Once their infiltration was discovered, the question arises why they were not removed, as this was the beginning of many millennia of a long, painful period in Earth's history. The answer is that this invasion was ultimately recognized and accepted in Shambhala, the Council of Enlightened Beings, which holds the purpose and plan for all life on Earth, as part of the higher plan. This decision was made after much careful debate in the Shambhala Council, with the assumption that struggling against these dark forces would strengthen and empower humanity. The alien invaders were allowed to remain because it was decided that providing each human soul the opportunity to make a choice between the higher path of light and the lower path of darkness would stimulate the most evolutionary growth, as karma, or the results of the choices made by each soul, unfolded from the sum of the thoughts, words, and actions chosen and expressed by each soul.
Mom?
What? Okay, just a minute. Decided that providing, okay, because it was decided that providing each human soul the opportunity, oh, I already read that. Okay. Unfolded from the sum of the thoughts, words, and actions chosen and expressed by each soul, many lessons and understandings of universal spiritual truths would emerge. Was this a correct assumption? Ultimately, yes, but it took longer and required, there we go, special assistance to become a positive factor in human evolution. The nature of this special assistance will be explained as we proceed. The formation of the Dark Lodge. The original alien group of about 50 beings steadily expanded their influence over humans by demonstrating their superior powers, and they gradually established the Dark Lodge on Earth. They were not able to reproduce among themselves, but ultimately interbred with humans, as they had the ability to shapeshift and appear to be human. This eventually resulted in powerful ruling groups or planetary elites, popularly known as the Cabal, who are cooperating with the Dark Aliens and have various levels of awareness of who they are actually working with. Some of the other powers of the Dark Ones allowed them to exert very powerful telepathic control and dominance over ordinary human beings. They also could see into the future for a certain cycle, although not to an unlimited degree. Mechanisms of the Cabal's control. Using human agents either under their control or voluntarily cooperating with their displays of power, the intruding aliens steadily established their centers of influence and control on inner and outer planes. Beginning in Lemuria, a very ancient civilization lost to history and developed further in Atlantis, the continent that existed in the Mid-Atlantic in ancient times. They employed psychotronic technologies, using combined psychic and technological means on the inner planes to create veils around the planet. By the use of these psychotronic veils, they were able to reduce the capacity of human DNA to absorb and radiate light, by shielding human DNA from the inflow of light, which is always present. For most individuals, these veils also blocked or limited access to the higher spiritual planes of consciousness, except for those who were strongly motivated to break through them. These are the veils that many spiritual teachings refer to, but are never clearly explained as to what they are or how they came to exist, as humanity has not been ready for this knowledge. They function by keeping humanity within the halls of Maya, immersed in the physical dimension as their only reality, or imprisoned on the astral emotional plane of desire through fear and controlled thought forms. Interbreeding with humans allowed the invaders, their offspring and cooperators, to ultimately establish, over very long periods of time, a vast network of control systems that function in the modern world through financial and political power, the media, interlocking corporate directorates, as well as through assassination, bribery, and intimidation of political leaders. Chapter 3, the struggle between the light and dark forces. The aliens first came to Earth during the Lemurian period, which was many millennia ago. The spiritual masters began opposing them from the very beginning of their intrusion. However, they could not be completely stopped or removed because the spiritual masters guiding the Earth did not have the power nor permission to remove them, as it had been determined that these dark forces would be part of Earth's evolutionary process. The masters opposed them by implementing the teachings of light, love, and higher purpose in every civilization and culture throughout the ages, inspiring all who were open to them, and thus, ever since, there has been a great battle for the minds, hearts, and souls of humanity. This has allowed humanity to evolve by choosing between the ways of light or darkness and learning from the karma of their choices. The growth and unfoldment of humanity has proceeded, although slowly, with a more deeply embedded understanding of why it is necessary and beneficial to all, including oneself, to choose the lighted, loving path. This has also greatly developed the potential. Okay.
Is it 2 parts?
2 parts rice to, no, 1 part rice to 2 parts water. There's also chicken broth you can use. Okay. Okay. This has also greatly developed the potential of humanity to assist their civilizations to move through a similar process in the future. The presence of the Dark Ones in Lemuria resulted in conflicts between Lemuria and Atlantis. Okay, come on. And eventually the Lemurian civilization disappeared. The Dark Ones then gradually infiltrated Atlantis, corrupting it and eventually taking it over. They knew much about genetic manipulation and created many hideous life forms. They tried to interfere with humanity's DNA, but were not completely successful due to the protection of humanity by their solar angels, the angelic presence that is with each person, known as our guardian angel. All the civilizations begun after Atlantis, Tibet, Central America, Egypt, began as a pure impulse, creating a high point of civilization, but gradually they were infiltrated by human agents of the Dark Ones. These reincarnated human Dark Ones were from Atlantis and other times, and their karmic line of least resistance again brought them into resonance with the Dark Overlords, the invading aliens. They were given direct instructions and goals to achieve in corrupting and manipulating these civilizations, especially the priests and political leaders. Ultimately, Atlantis became so corrupted it was destroyed. When Atlantis was inundated by the flood, as described in the Bible and other spiritual teachings, the human cooperators with the Dark Lodge were destroyed, but not the originating Dark Group, as they were embedded on the inner planes. Okay, World War II. World War II. Many centuries later, World War II was another attempt by these same alien Dark Ones who controlled Hitler and the Nazis to take over the planet as a whole. In the monumental struggle. Okay, now I'm feeling self-conscious because I'm looking at myself. I don't look very good. The lighting. It's okay. Okay, but let's just get to this chapter. Okay, take over. Don't look at me, just listen to me, which I'm really hoping the sound is okay. And if it's terrible and you can't hear me, then I will just have to delete this. And maybe I wasn't supposed to read this thing online, but I thought it would be handy to listen to if you're driving somewhere or doing the dishes and you just don't have time to sit down and read this book. It's kind of fun book that I actually haven't read, so I just figured I might as well read it online while I'm reading it. You guys can hear it, you know. It might end up being totally not the direction I'm trying to go at all as far as interest goes. You never know with this stuff. I have not researched the author, but I did like the beginning. It was fun. Okay. The spiritual masters. Okay. Yeah. Many centuries later, World War II was another attempt by these same alien Dark Ones who controlled Hitler and the Nazis to take over the planet as a whole. In the monumental struggle with the spiritual forces of light, the Dark Ones nearly won, but help from beyond the earth was given to the Allied powers. This help, according to the information I received from the ashram and meditation, came from galactic civilizations, from Sirius, the Pleiades, and Arcturus. Although the galactic civilizations did not directly intervene, they provided the energy for the allies, the spiritual masters and Shambhala, to hold the point of spiritual tension and thus outlast and defeat the dark forces. The galactics were not permitted to intervene directly at that time, as the goal was to maintain a balance between the spiritual hierarchy and the Dark Lodge, so that humanity would have to choose between them and act, which they did. There also was a race with the Dark Ones for the development of the atomic bomb, and the Galactics prevented the Axis powers from accessing the secrets of atomic energy and using it more extensively than the Allies. With the defeat of the Axis powers, many of their human cooperators were destroyed, but the Dark Lodge was not fully eliminated. They were temporarily driven behind the door where evil dwells, the specific location on the inner planes where they were sealed and remained. It was then humanity's responsibility to keep this door closed by not being open to harmful values, attitudes, and actions, but it has not been able to do so. The United Nations was the spiritual hierarchy's attempt, after the war, to establish a world government of light. It has been partially successful, despite some infiltration by the Dark Ones. I'd have to disagree that it's been successful. So, I may end up not reading this book if it goes too far down one path that I don't agree with, but that's okay. Okay. The modern plan for domination of the earth. As the influence and control of the Dark Lodge re-emerged after World War II and grew in the modern world, plans were put in place for ever greater domination and exploitation of humanity. One of these was to reduce the population of the Earth by 80% for easier control. This was to be carried out through nuclear war, epidemics like the SARS virus, and other means. The staged destruction of the Twin Trade Towers and other buildings in New York on 9/11 was intended to create an event which would instill great fear and justify removing many freedoms and protections of U.S. citizens. It would allow the installation of ever greater controls in the name of Homeland Security. This plan was successful in creating greater fear and control, but it had massive, unforeseen consequences for the Dark Lodge. The consequences of 9/11 and the spiritual decrees, chapter 4. Okay, that's the next one. Anyway, I'll probably end up uploading this if it's not already uploaded or whatever, or I'll save it, this video. It'll be my first video of this book. And I'm just kind of thinking of reading this as long as it keeps interesting me. If it goes down certain propaganda paths, I'm just gonna have to quit it. But anyway, so we're on chapter 12. That video is too long, so next one will be shorter. And I'll start where we left off. And hopefully I'll do it soon. Okay. So, now what do I do? What's this mean? I hope I'm not doing this sideways. That'd be annoying. I think I probably am. I think you're seeing ways. I think I did that whole thing sideways. Right? Did I? And my phone's too hot. Let's give me some blush. That looks better. Okay, so anyway, how do I close this? I'm not trying to do this anymore. I'm trying to close it, right? To end it. So, I'm doing that. I guess, do I just do an X? Okay. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? End.